Hey y'all, hope you're doing well today. Belleairballer here, Rocket League analyst. We are doing some power rankings for Europe as we head into the second regional event this weekend. I've been poring over a lot of stats and doing a lot of replay analysis to try and get a sense for this region that is so hard to understand and kind of tier where these teams should be. So we're going to give some stats and some reasons as to why these teams are where they are. Going to try and do it in as quick and concise a way as possible. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into it. All right, for a little bit of background, we are watching Game 6 between G1 and Oxygen from the playoffs, probably one of the better matches we had over Europe's first event. But we're rocking with Joreus, and the reason we are doing so is because Oxygen takes a pretty commanding first spot as we head into this second event. Ton of quality wins. They beat G1 in the playoffs, which we're seeing now. They beat Quadrant in the playoffs. Big wins against Team Liquid and Monkeys in Swiss, and also big win over Karmine Corp in the grand finals. Of course, Karmine Corp looked electric in the first regional event. No teams have taken them to 7, which is really impressive. Something that I talked about recently in a video is for top teams, you're looking for them not only to beat the opponents that are the same rank as them, you want to beat everybody, but also Oxygen does not really mess around with teams that they should be beating, the lone exception being Aogiri, who beat them in 5 to start out the tournament. Joreus and Archie look great, and Oli is an unsung hero for this team. I was unsure what to make of this roster as we were getting into the season, having not really seen a lot of Oli previously, just kind of going off of stats, but he's looked like an impeccable distributor for this team, a real connector for Archie and Joreus, who are looking to find the ball in optimal spots. Oli gets it to him 9 times out of 10 and is exactly where he needs to be. Really dynamic playing off of those two. No obvious weak links for this team. They're very tough to shut down offensively, and they really score in bunches. Based on what we've seen, I would be pretty surprised if anybody had a team besides Oxygen number 1. But, of course, always great to make arguments for whomever you are backing. Number 2. Could have gone to Karmine Corp, who made the grand finals, but we're actually going to go BDS. Now, I get it. They lost to Quadrant in the quarterfinals of the first event. Definitely means they have something to prove moving forward. While I'm not trying to take anything away from Quadrant, and we'll talk about them later on, I thought BDS looked very poor in that series overall. They went 3-0 in Swiss, but took them 5 games to beat Guild, who nobody should really be losing to at these main events. Took 5 to beat KC, and also G1, so they're really playing their series close, which is something that they would look to improve on as well. But these guys are the previous world champs for a reason. They should look a lot better. Seiko and Monkey Moon shot a combined 4 of 44 against Quadrant, which is absolutely atrocious. Over the event, Extra scored more goals than Seiko, even though Seiko took 20 more shots than him. So if Seiko looks any fraction closer to what we anticipate from him instead of what he looked like in the first regional event, BDS will be a lot better. Would be totally unsurprised by a BDS win. Now third, the team that could have gone second, honestly, Karmine Corp. I'm keeping my eyes on this team. Come Worlds, it could be a legitimate contender. Not just somebody you feel like you need to mention, but a legitimate contender. Vatira is a star. He can look like the best player on any given day. Best player in the world, that is, in my opinion. Itachi is intelligent, glue, a la what Extra kind of does for BDS. He can play a lot of different styles. He can do what you need him to do, depending on either what you're trying to do to the opposing team or what the opposing team is trying to do to you. And Exotic is a real X factor. Loved him on Semper to end last season. Of course, they went out in Worlds with Chaussette and Exotic with COVID playing from their hotel rooms. But I thought Exotic looked pretty incredible for that team who everybody sold short on because they got rid of Archie and everybody thought they were just going to fall into, this pit of despair. But Exotic kept them more than relevant, in my opinion. They have a huge fan base too, which, it doesn't really mean anything online, maybe not even at some of these majors that we're going to have. But I think at Worlds, depending on where it is, that could be something. This team has a lot of drive. They have a lot to prove. I think they're all competitive players. They're all experienced players, which are kind of hard to find for the entirety of a team. And honestly, I think they have less pressure than some of the other teams that we're going to talk about. So there's that as well. All right. Number 4, Moist Esports. They went 3-0 in Swiss. They beat who they should, but they won tight series against Team Liquid. They lost to Karmine Corp. Karmine Corp, Moist looked dreadful in that series, to be honest. It's probably in a big way due to the rematch against Vatira. But Joyo should look better in that series and moving forward as well. I think he's going to be a pretty exceptional connector for this team, getting the ball to Rise and Astral when in positions that they want. For this team, he only had 8 assists in the first regional event, which was the lowest statistically across the board. As this team gets more time together, I think they'll continue to improve so long as their comms, feel better. I felt like Astral and Rise were bumping into each other a whole lot and double committing a whole lot in the first event, so that should be better. But they could win any major this season, and I would not be surprised. Really high-end talent on that team. 5th, we have Team Liquid. Very high expectations from fans, and I hope the same for the players as well. This is a young, uber-talented team. We didn't see them all last season until spring because they weren't old enough to play. But then in spring, they impressed. They perfect swept Moist in one of the regional events. They made a grand finals. They reverse swept G2 at the major, which was pretty impressive for a first time on that stage against, a World's Grand Finals team. The returning roster should be even better, but this season they've lost to Moist, they've lost to Oxygen, they've lost to Karmine Corp, and those series were not close. So for a team that should be better than they were last season to be dropping pretty hard games to, teams that they anticipate themselves beating or at the very least being competitive against isn't an awesome sign, but I think there's some reasons that made them look so bad. Chronic had a terrible first regional, the lowest rating at the Open. He was a bottom 5 statistically in score, goals per game, shots, shooting percentage, and goal participation. He just has to be better for them. I know that Team Liquid are boot camping this event, and they have AO Giri in round 1 who took the opener off Oxygen in the Fall Open. So Team Liquid better come to play, but if they do, they should look a lot better than they did in the first event. And first event was playoffs, even with the Chronic looking terrible. So, pretty good starting bar. 6th place, we have G1. Lot of variance so far from this team. On paper, I really like this team. I'm a big believer in Mark by 8. I think Atomic is a phenomenal striker, but the defense has looked really wobbly at times, and I think that's partially due to Dorito. That's something that he needs to be more solid on. He was just not making all the saves that he needed to. He was wonky positionally over the course of the event in different spots. So I would look for him to be a little bit better if this team wants to go really deep in an event. I was surprised that this team was outshot so heavily. We always talk about that Spanish Bim Bam style. They're, running quick. They're moving down the pitch. But they get outshot quite a bit by their opponents. They're dead even on per game goal and assist differential. So they're still trying to, I would say, build an identity of what they're trying to do. I rate them above some of the other new teams that we have sorting things out, but a second scorer really needs to step up for Atomic to not have so much pressure on himself. And I think that we're going to get that as Mark continues to, shake off some of the rust and get back into things. They had really deep series against BDS and Oxygen. They beat Quadrant twice. They beat teams that they should beat, but the offense really fell apart against Karmine Corp, which honestly seems like something Karmine has done against quite a few teams now. But I feel good about this team. Not great. I think there's a pretty low chance that they win this event, but who knows? Maybe they look totally different as we see them with more practice and time together. All right, now this was really tough. 7th, I have Quadrant. I'm honestly not really sold on this team yet, but I see the vision, I see the potential. They own the most surprising EU win of the season. They beat BDS in the playoffs. BDS looked less than optimal, but so did Cash. He took a team low 11 shots and only had one goal in that series against BDS. So effectively, EXO and Relating Wave beat BDS offensively. And the only goal that he did score, Cash that is, was the Game 7 overtime goal, which was created by EXO and then just kind of put in by Cash. So for somebody who was the number 8 overall rating between North America and Europe last season in Cash, to have such a poor series and they still pull one out against the grand finals, the world champions of last season, it's got to mean something, right? But I think I get a little caught up with us talking about this team having this uber strong defensive identity. I just don't think that that's the case. Relating Wave is experienced. He is won at a high level. He's a very solid role player. EXO is also solid, and he had an impressive Regional 1. Big shots against Aogiri in Game 5 to make the playoffs. Looked best on the team against BDS, in my opinion. Gives him somewhat of a defensive presence. But again, I just saw some weird stuff about Quadrant being this, uber defensive team. Sure, they had a lot of saves, but I just don't look at them as this kind of brick wall of, impossible to get past, defensive players on the team. I just don't know if that's what their true identity is. But Cash really needs to keep showing up in big games. He was the lowest scorer in Game 5 against Solary, against Aogiri, and again, we talked about that bad series against BDS. There's a little bit of a stigma that is fair or unfair attached to Cash from Misfits continually choking in big moments last season. So got to get past that. But this team is probably better than I'm giving them credit for. But I think this is a pretty fair spot for Quadrant overall. Oh, and one last note on them. Yes, they got 4-0'd by Oxygen in the playoffs, but we talked about Oxygen being incredibly dominant, and all of those games were pretty tightly contested, even though they were all losses. So not a quality loss, but not like this absolute blowout or anything like that. Next up, we have Evil Geniuses, who I'll be darned have had a pretty tough to gauge season so far. They went 3-0 in the top 16. Which is cool and all, but what's that really worth? As it's basically like an NBA preseason. It's not really what we're expecting these teams to look like. But they made an off-season move to pick up Tox and get rid of Rizex. It's a team that doesn't rely heavily on one individual player, which is nice. They're not overly reliant on anyone to show up, or they're trash. But also, it does require everyone to show up in some way. And if somebody's having an off day or a poor event or a poor series, that can really spell trouble for this team who, needs all 3 players to be looking pretty quality. In Regional 1, they lost to Sonics. They got swept by Quadrant. Not good looks. They're yet to beat a playoff team besides, they took a series off BDS in top 16. But again, that's like preseason. Catalysm looked out of place in Regional 1. He looked faster in closed qualifiers. They were a bubble team last season. They're looking to break through, but that's going to require Ivan and Tox to continue to connect well, which they were doing in the closed qualifiers, I will say. But I just don't feel super strong about this team yet. They're going to need to prove it. 9th place, Monkeys. Exciting Monkeys team. I just recently did a video about Smokes. If you're interested in that dynamic rookie, I'll have the card up above. Smokes is a really quality replacement for Cash. He's obviously not Cash yet, but statistically it looked awesome. I won't go too far into it. If you want, you can watch that video. Mechanically gifted, really great running mate for Matane on the offensive end. Arju, very upfield, very aggressive player. He's going to have to, if that style is going to work out and these guys are going to beat top teams, he's either going to need to become a more effective passer or a more effective shooter. Both of those numbers were just under the average. And that's even worse when you're a player who spends so much time upfield, not even a big demoer really. So kind of just upfield, just kind of hanging out. He's got to become more statistically impactful, so this team becomes more of a 3-man unit. Matane and Smokes shot crazy well in the first regional. I highly doubt that is going to look the exact same. That's probably going to take a dip, in my opinion, going into this second event. So either that scoring is going to have to come from somewhere else, or they're going to have to become a lot stronger on the defensive end. But excited by Monkeys, certainly a team that could get picked up. And hey, maybe could make a major. I don't think so, but stuff can change, especially as Smokes continues to develop in his first season. And then finally, 10th spot. Could have been a couple of teams. Could have been Aogiri. I think honestly could have been Solary. There's an argument to make there. Am I leaving anybody out? I think it's a little silly, but fun to talk about Vitality. But yeah, I gave it to Tundra just because they have the strongest track record, not only in events, but also in experience. Proven quality role players. Cassio, the old veteran, Rizix 45, my favorite player from that old Evil Geniuses roster. Raziers, hyped young player. Really, really like watching him on the ball. They're a low boost team. They're slow. They're methodical, but they find themselves in this really bad stat combination. So get this. Not only have they allowed the highest shooting percentage, which, hey, maybe it's skewed. Maybe some team just was really on fire and scored a lot of their opportunities against them. But they allowed the highest shooting percentage. They allow the second lowest shots. And these are the two that go together. So I'll say it again. They allow the second lowest shots, but also almost allow 2 goals per game. So again, maybe the shooting percentage is high just because, one team really ran it up on them. But if you're going to allow almost the lowest shots per game of any team at the event, and you're going to let in almost the highest goals per game, that's an issue. Based on some of the boost patterns that I was seeing, primarily Raziers and Rizix being overwhelmingly low boost players, and relying on Cassio to get a lot of big boost steals. This is a team that just, I think, plays a lot more upfield than is something they can do with the players that they have. That's not really clear. I guess what I'm saying is they don't have this defensive anchor to allow them to be pushed so far upfield, and they're just giving up really, really easy chances. They need to make those harder. They need to be harder to score on if they want to beat the best teams. So right now they're just in this dangerous middle zone. But I'm a believer and a fan of all 3 of the players on that team. I think they're all Rocket League or RLCS level talent. So that is why I have them at 10. Really quick hits. Some of the teams that could be here. Aogiri is basically a Stizzy team. VK Salen is a great passer. I think Ocelon does what he needs to do as well, but that's really a product of Stizzy in a lot of ways. That team just gets shot on so much, it's unbelievable. I think they get shot on like 10 or 11 shots per game, which is just a gaudy number. Solary, veteran team, they rely a lot on KDOP to have it going offensively, which is just not the best bet in the world these days. I still am a fan of KDOP, just not like that. Vitality, they've just had such a weird season. It feels so dumb to even speculate about what to anticipate from them. Heat maybe could show up and surprise somebody. They got Parka and Juicy on that team, who are both really quality scorers. Who else am I forgetting? Team Go, that's the Whiskey Drinks team that was Gross Noobs previously. Whiskey Drink looked like one of the worst players statistically in closed qualifiers, just could not find the back of the net. I just don't think you're beating these top teams if your best scorer is Econ. Maybe that's me. I haven't watched enough of them to be some expert on that team on Team Go, but it's just what I've seen so far. And then I think the only team I've left out is Turbo Clappers. I like Lhasa as a passer on that team. Hibs and Dying are quality scorers, but I don't think that team is taking games off of anybody. I would be pretty blown away if they took more than one series win. So yeah, guys, that is it. Thank you guys for giving me some of your time. I hope that you learned something today, and excited to see how this event plays out over this weekend. So catch you guys next time, and as always, take it easy.